stop you. Still in the business.
He's been bitten many times, and it hasn't made him afraid. Ram Chandra, the snake man, is a legend in Queensland. Ram lives at Mackay on Queensland's tropical north coast. The lush beauty of its countryside is an everyday thing to him. He doesn't notice the palms and the tree orchids. He looks at the ground. He was born Edward Ram Sammy, but only his family and close friends know him by that name. The Queensland public has known him for 30 years as Ram Chandra, snake catcher and snake handler. The man who's been bitten so many times by venomous snakes that he's almost lost the use of his legs.
Oh, look, there's one there, look. Go get him, quick.
These days, Ram needs the help of his son Eddie to get about. But snakes are still his livelihood, and like any businessman, he has to make sure he has enough stock in hand.
Ram Chandra, the snake expert, will be appearing in David Jones today at 12:30. Go and hear Mackay's famous snake expert, Ram Chandra. Amongst other things, he'll be explaining how to tell a venomous snake from a non-poisonous one. Remember, if you see a snake in your yard, don't kill it. Call Ram Chandra. It could be more valuable alive than dead. And don't forget...
People everywhere should be taught this. They should know the snakes that exist in their district that kill people. Not only that, they should know the pattern of symptoms of those snakes that are there. In this district, there's about 4 varieties. Now, the muscle movement of snakes is quite important. The strength of the reptile is the muscles under the neck. They can open their mouth to enormous sizes, and this one could comfortably take a bandicoot or a half-grown wallaby. Lots of rows of teeth, as you see. In fact, if you also open the mouth of any snake, look for this to tell whether it's venomous or not. On the top jaws, the fangs will be there, but if they're venomous snakes, they have a single row of teeth, 7 to 16, in fact, behind the... People have an unholy fear with snakes. I think it's inherited from their parents. Everybody seems to get a fright when they see snakes or snake bite, and so my work of handling snakes takes a lot of the fear out. You know, a venomous snake bites you, this is what happens. You could see tiny blood flecks there, but this is something else you'd see too. You would see little pools of poison. So I'm going to show you that now, and I'm going to ask for the assistance of one of the ladies here. When the lady comes forward to have her finger bitten, usually the expression on everybody else's faces is they just don't know what to think. Now, would you like to come round and I'm going to ask this young lady to put her arm through mine. Put your finger through. Right. Thank you, sir. There'll be a twinge of pain as the snake bites. I won't let it savage you. I'll control the bite. Look for the blood, but look too. There's no other agent there bar the blood. Don't worry about it. I'm going to squeeze a finger, and the blood's going to fall out in a drop. You can clearly see it, but as she walks through, would you look? And have a good look. There's no other agent bar the blood. You've got to get to the people's minds, and I think I've got to that lady's mind. Although she's frightened, she's prepared to experience this, and not only that, to let everybody else have a look so that they too may gain some knowledge on it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Ram Chandra here, getting ready for our first demonstration. If you're going to this one, would you get a ticket and look at the display now, please? Those children wanting tickets, would you come over now and get your tickets? That's the idea.
Around Mackay, no show is considered complete without Ram Chandra there as well. He is by now an institution, with the children he once entertained now bringing along their children. He started his tent shows 30 years ago as Ram Chandra, the Indian Cobra Boy. The publicity claimed that he was brilliantly educated, fearless, daring, and unnatural, handling the deadliest reptiles in the universe. In reality, under the turban was an Australian boy from a little town on the north coast of New South Wales, a boy who grew up just as frightened of snakes as the rest of us.
I remember quite well that as a child I was quite frightened of snakes, but I came across a carpet snake in a dairy one time, and I knocked it down off the rafter. It struck at me and I was really frightened of it. However, I caught it and the fear left me then afterwards, little by little.
Ram's work in the snake pit was the high point of his act. To the onlookers, a suicidal thing to attempt. He billed it as the pit of death, and he was in fact moving amongst reptiles capable of killing.
This one here is a red-bellied Australian black snake, and it's dangerous. This one here is a tree snake, and he's non-venomous. Over here we have a death adder, and they're one of the dangerous ones in Australia, death adders. They flatten out, and believe me, their venom is very, very potent. Over here, it's the brown snake, and it's dangerous, highly dangerous.
There was one snake Ram did not have, one he knew nothing about, a special snake, big, fast, and very dangerous. Ram could not have known that this snake would become an obsession with him, an obsession that was to dominate his life. His mastery of that snake was finally to earn him the gratitude of all Australians living in the tropics. Australia has 130 species of snakes. Over 20 of them are considered dangerous to man. 5 or 6 of them are certain killers. The only protection against snakebite for Australia's settlers was first aid and home remedies. There was no specific antidote. Even well into this century, to be bitten by one of the bad ones was to be abandoned to fate. Snakebite was fairly common along the Queensland coast. Some comfort came in 1930 when the tiger snake antivenin was developed. They found that this often gave relief with bites of other snakes too, such as the brown and the black snakes. But something else was killing around Mackay, and an average of 4 people were dying every year.
My sister was bitten by the snake just beside the house there. She went there to throw some rubbish into the cane because nobody was home at the time and nobody knows exactly how it happened. But anyway, when she got bitten, she rang her sister up. She lived down the road a bit, and her husband and her came over, and they also rang the school teacher up. And he came over and they administered the first aid, rang the ambulance. The ambulance came out, and then they took her to the hospital, the Marta Hospital there in town. And they gave her antivenin, but nobody knew what the snake was, really. They didn't know whether it was a tiger snake, brown, black. She said she'd seen a black snake. So all they could do was give her a tiger snake antivenin. But then she died the next day.
What were the symptoms, Tony?
Well, only from what I was told afterwards that she vomited on the way into hospital in the ambulance. She vomited blood and that was one of the symptoms. And also while she was in hospital, I seen her there about a couple of hours after she got bitten, and she said she was drowsy and sleepy and that, and tired. But that was about all, I mean, she said anyway. She was 19 years old.
tiger snake venom was useless against this snake. It had to be something so far unrecognised in the district. And Ram Chandra said, it's the taipan. "30 years ago, the taipan was believed to exist only on Cape York Peninsula, the northern tip of Queensland. And that's what people wanted to believe. The taipan was Australia's largest venomous snake. It was aggressive and fast, and its poison was shockingly potent. There was no antivenin, first aid only delayed death, and for just a few hours. To be bitten by a taipan was to be sentenced to death. In 1950, a young snake catcher named Kevin Budden went looking for a taipan near Cairns. He found one, and it killed him. Ram Chandra read about Budden's death, and something clicked. He reread the symptoms of that fatal bite, and he realised that they were the same as symptoms of other fatal bites that had occurred near Mackay, hundreds of kilometres south of Cairns. Ram Chandra became convinced that the books were wrong. He came to believe that the taipan was here, around Mackay, and probably further south, perhaps right down the Queensland coast. Ram Chandra began a campaign to make the public aware of his discovery. He knew already that local farmers talked about two types of brown snakes. He guessed that one of them was the taipan. He asked farmers not to kill any snake they saw, but to call him. And until that call came, he investigated every attack in his region.
I was on the ambulance for 42 years, and during that period, we handled a lot of snake bites. Myself treated dozens and dozens, I wouldn't know how many, but in those days we lost on an average of about 4 patients a year, and I'm convinced now that a lot of these deaths were due to taipan bites.
Shift that timber. Tony, you really think it's a taipan, eh?
Well, it could be. It's a big bugger.
Is he?
Yeah.
We knew nothing about taipans in those days until Ram Chandra came on the scene and educated us in identification of snakes, and then we discovered that this taipan was with us. And people were being bitten by it.
We'll manage, I think. So if you just rake the dirt off it, really, like this, rake it all off. Like that, right? Yeah. That's how I'll get it cleared there to pick it up.
Whereabouts are you going to pick him from? We're going to see
I think over your side, I think. I'll get round here, you come on. All right. I think you might best stand back a little, eh? Tony, just even with your gun. Just tell her that it is. I've got a... That's too much there.
They were known to be in Queensland. We didn't know they were in this area. We didn't recognise them as such. To us, just a brown snake. I first met Ram Chandra in the early 50s, and he then was doing a survey on venomous snakes. He's catching snakes and demonstrating them. It was then that it came to my knowledge that the taipan was here, and he had it and was demonstrating this taipan to anyone who would like to come along and have a look at it.
All right. He's a nice big one. I'd say he'd be around 7 foot easily.
Well, in those days there was no antivenin. It was the most venomous snake in Australia, and there was no such thing as an antivenin until Ram Chandra started milking these taipans and sending the serum away to the laboratory.
This is the Taipan antivenin. This is what it looks like. Before we had it, we had to deal with some rather terrible symptoms because the taipan would be the most dangerous snake in the world. It contains 3 separate forms of poison. One is a neurotoxin which causes paralysis, loss of vision, hearing, that kind of thing. One is a hemolysin, it makes the blood turn to water more or less, and the other is a coagulant, it makes the blood clot within the blood vessels.
What happens in the body when these start to work?
Well, the patient could bleed from the nose, the ears, the stomach, from the bowel, the bladder, bleed from anywhere or internally. The patient could become paralysed, fall over, become comatose and die. The patient can develop odd pains or go into spasms with the neurotoxin. And as I say, it's a terribly dangerous snake because it's not only a big snake, but it has very large amounts of poison and a very efficient method of injecting the poison.
And when did we get the antivenin?
Must have been 1954 that we got our first specimens of antivenin. The first specimens actually came to me so that I could give some protection for Ram Chandra. I was always very impressed with Ram's personal courage. In the days when he was working with taipans, there was no taipan antivenin available, and we knew that if he got a decent bite, it would almost certainly be fatal.
You can notice why that's a taipan snake by its shape of its body first. See, it's got a long head and a thin neck and a long, sleek, aristocrat type of body. When they do become aggressive, they throw that strike from the neck, and let me tell you this, that one would throw its strike about half the distance of its body, about 3 feet. He's arched his neck there a little. When he gets into that position, he's ready to strike, because he could still let the strike go quite high. Once stirred up, because of the length of the fang and the quantity of poison that they inject, he knows, I think, in his own heart, that snake, that they have the power to stop either animals or little things or whatever they want to bite. And, of course...
Well, excuse me, what do you mean length of the fang?
Well, the fang of a taipan snake that size would be in the vicinity of a ½ an inch long, and you could see clearly by looking at that fang is possibly a ½ an inch in length.
Is this...
And I'll show you that. I'll poke that with a match, and you'll find that that thing is a needle-like structure, and it's quite long, and it's about a ½ an inch in length.
Is that the normal length?
Yes, and that snake down there would have a fang almost that length, probably.
And how does the venom itself compare with the venom of other snakes?
Well, the venom, firstly, when it ejects venom into anything, this snake could eject about 100 times the quantity of venom of a brown snake its same size. I've tested common brown snakes and taken the venom out of them and had it measured at a couple of milligrams. But these snakes, you could get 140, 150 milligrams. And I believe on one occasion, one big taipan snake that had never been milked before gave 300 milligrams of venom. So that's huge quantities of venom, and that fang would be at least 5 times the length of an ordinary brown snake's fang. The quickest death, and I've recorded these deaths over the years that I've been at this work, 30-odd years, and the quickest death that ever I've seen has been a child that was bitten at a school ground. It died in 3 hours, but there was no antivenin in those days. But what happened was the little girlie ran down into the playground, and the grass was about that high, and she tripped over and fell onto the snake which was in the grass, and it savaged her. In fact, it had bitten her 9 times. They'd found 9 distinct snake bites on her. And of course, she died in 3 hours. Yes, he's a pretty big snake, isn't he? Still, get him settled down a bit.
I was handling Taipan snakes, and I knew that I was taking a terrific risk, so I decided to do something about it. I decided to make a cure, as there was no antivenin at the time. If it had worked, it would have been useful for the whole community, and then, of course, maybe I could have made some money with it. I was watching the snakebite cases, the people that died, and everybody that they used tiger, when they only had tiger snake serum in those days, so they used to use this tiger snake serum. But, you know, I used to watch the people, and every time their stomach, when they opened them for the post-mortem, would be swimming in blood. So the anticoagulant action was the thing that was actually killing. So I thought that I could make something to cure that anticoagulant action. So that's exactly what I did.
You made up an antivenin?
For the anticoagulant action part of that Taipan venom.
What was in that?
Well, it was a mixture of Epsom salts and glycerine. Now, we made some tests on animals, and it proved successful, but whether it would have been successful on humans, I don't know.
Would you have used it on yourself if you'd been bitten?
When I saw the animal recover, well, it was the only thing that I had, and of course I
So would you have used your homemade antivenin?
I think I would have if I'd have been bitten when there was no serum made. It was one of those things, well, you just didn't have anything else, and one chance is better than no chance.
Well, I've been a doctor in Mackay for 30 years. It must have been in early 1951 where I first met Ram Chandra, and he was introduced to me by a naturalist who he had tried to get interested in his patent remedy for snakebite. He wanted, very bravely, he wanted me to inject him with the cure and then let the Taipan bite him just to prove that his special cure would really work. I think it was tremendously brave of him, tremendously foolish, but I had to point out to him this would be quite impossible. Well, I said to Ram, there must be a better way. And then shortly after that, we had a North Queensland medical conference in Townsville, and we met a doctor from the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, and he said, if you can produce the venom, we can produce the antivenin. So since Ram was already milking the Taipan for public demonstrations, we said, right, well, we'll take the venom and we'll dehydrate it, send it down to the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory, they'll make the antivenin, which they did.
Right. Take it to them. Good. I'll just...
Twice a week, Ram Chandra milked the taipan of its venom. Twice a week, he caught and handled the great reptile. Before the antivenin could be produced by the laboratories, they had to have a reliable and steady supply of venom. Ram delivered, 1/4 teaspoon at a time.
Morning, Arthur.
Morning, Doctor. You got some more venom here for us?
Yes, Ram was up early this morning.
When the antivenin was made, it was distributed to all the centres where Ram said the taipan existed. Queensland was ready for the next time the taipan struck.
I remember the first time that the Taipan antivenin was used in Australia. It happened in Cairns, where a boy, Bruce Stringer, he was only 11 years old and he got bitten at a school at Freshwater. And this is how he got bitten. He was playing at play lunch time and he got through the fence and he ran along a track and he jumped over a log. And as he jumped over the log, the snake bit him above the knee, and as he looked to see what had bitten him, all he saw was about 9 or 10 inches of the snake's tail, and it was brown in colour, and that's all he could tell the schoolmaster at the time. So they put him in an ambulance and sent him to Cairns Hospital, and he was there within 20 minutes. They treated him for brown snake bite, and those days tiger snake serum was used. And it was 14 hours after that he was bitten. He was almost dead, this child, and
he got awfully sick. His eyesight had failed, he was vomiting blood, and his breathing system had become damaged, and actually he was gasping for breath. And the doctor, it was Dr. Lester in charge of Cairns Base Hospital, and he decided to ask the parents whether Taipan antivenin could be used, because they thought it could have been a Taipan bite. So they used the Taipan antivenin, and within a couple of hours, practically all Taipan symptoms had left him, although his eyes only opened halfway, and it took 5 days for those eyes to completely open. But he was a very lucky boy to be alive. The wound where he was bitten, it bled continuously for about 5 days. A few days later, I saw Bruce Stringer in hospital, and he said to me, he said, "Mr. Chandra, I'd like to be a doctor one day." And again afterwards, when he was 20 years of age, I met him, and he was training to be a doctor. And the interesting thing, I said, "Is anything wrong with you?" And he said, "The only thing that I feel occasionally is a twitch in the muscle where the snake had bitten me." And then he was lucky because he became a doctor, of course, but he was lucky because he was the first person in Australia to actually survive with Taipan serum.
And how did you feel about that, Ram? Can you remember?
Well, not only was I pleased, I thought it was one of the greatest things that ever happened, because prior to that, I'd been milking Taipan snakes, and in those days I was the only one doing it. And I thought to myself, I'd risked my life all those years, and, you know, it seemed that all my dreams had come true because the child had lived.
The drama of the Stringer story grabbed the attention of all Queensland. Ram was flooded by invitations to lecture on the snake. A few months afterwards, the Taipan struck back. Ram himself was bitten. He became only the second person to receive the life-saving antivenin. The antivenin had been made from the same snake that Ram had milked.
And stay on ABC for last year's World Professional Figure Skating Championships, the All-Stars versus the Pro Stars. Coming up next, here on ABC.